What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in again. I'm here to talk about another story that happened in Colorado. This story is about Alexis Mendez Perez, and it's a pretty sad story, but I think it's important that we talk about his story, talk about what happened, and hopefully fight to bring him justice. It's a little bit different from the other stories I've talked about, and I'll tell you how. But now that you're here, please definitely like this video, subscribe if you want to hear more about these different types of stories. So now that we got that out of the way, let's hop right into Alexis' story. So Alexis and some others were trespassing in a vacant home in Montbello, Colorado. The neighbors behind the home that they were trespassing noticed that there was activity going on inside, knew that the home should have been vacant, and proceeded to call the police. Now, once Alexis and the others realized that the police were there, they decided to flee the scene. So they were trying to run from the police, and so Alexis and another unidentified individual decided to run through the backyard of the home that they were in, jump the fence, and they ended up in the neighbors who called the police. They ended up in their yard. And what happened is that while they're in that yard, the neighbor, Desmond Manning, then decided to shoot Alexis and the person who was with him as they were running through his yard. He ends up wounding the person with Alexis and mortally wounding Alexis, who dies later after he's taken to the hospital. And so all around, this is a pretty sad story because Alexis, he was only 16. He was a juvenile. He was clearly, breaking the law, not doing what he should have been doing, in a bad situation, running from the police. He was definitely committing a crime, but those crimes should not be punishable by death. They are not punishable by death, and yet he was still murdered as a result of Desmond Manning. Now, this is a different type of dynamic that we usually see the media talk about, because Desmond Manning is a black Department of Corrections officer, and Alexis Mendez Perez was a young Hispanic male. So you have this black off-duty officer who is on his own property, who decides to shoot and kill a fleeing young Hispanic man. All around, this is just a tragic thing. Like I said, Alexis was only 16. He was trespassing. He shouldn't have been doing that. The people he was with, they shouldn't have been doing that, but they should not have been killed as a result of simply trespassing in a vacant home. They weren't committing a violent crime. They were just simply trespassing, and unfortunately, Alexis died because of the overreaction of the neighbor who lived behind the home that they were trespassing. Now, it's important to note that an autopsy was performed on Alexis' body, and it was found that there was no soot or gunpowder stippling on his body, meaning that when the shots were fired that killed him, they were not in close range. And it also showed that he was shot in the back. Desmond Manning was actually arrested under suspicion of second-degree murder that night, but later he was released without having to post bail. Again, later, the district attorney, Beth McCann, decided not to press charges on Desmond Manning because she said that he has a strong self-defense case. Now, this is concerning because there's really no evidence that Desmond Manning was actually defending himself. All we know is that Alexis and the other unidentified male were running through his yard, which is not a reason to shoot somebody. It's not reasonable for somebody to take that sort of drastic measure, but it's also not legal to do, because in the state of Colorado, according to Colorado Revised Statute, Title 18, Article 1, Part 7, deadly force can only be used if a reasonable person believes that lesser force would be inadequate, and that person has reasonable ground to believe that they are in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. And so what we know from this is that the people who were trespassing then on Desmond Manning's property were running from the police. There was no reason, especially because Alexis was shot in the back, There's no reason that a reasonable person would think that their life is in danger by people running through their yard. These people were unarmed. There was no evidence or no reason to believe that they were armed. So there was no reason that this young man, this child at 16, should have been killed, and that the person who killed him should not have faced any charges. So like I said, Beth McCann decided to drop these charges, stating that there wasn't enough evidence. But similar to Elijah McClain's case, if you're not going to charge him with second-degree murder, you could at least charge him with reckless use of a firearm or assault with a deadly weapon or any number of things. This legal precedent is not something that we want to be. We do not want people getting shot and killed anytime they're simply trespassing on another person's property. This is a dangerous precedent to set simply for the sake of protecting a Department of Corrections officer. Now, Colorado law also states that deadly force can only be used when you are defending your dwelling space. And a dwelling space is defined as any place where you inhabit and live in. So your lawn is not a dwelling space because that is not where the space that you inhabit and live. That is simply an outdoor area, which is your property, but is not a dwelling space. Both the fact that Alexis was not inside of Desmond Manning's dwelling space and the fact that he was fleeing from them are two clear-cut reasons why this should not be treated as self-defense. This is just a case of Desmond Manning being reckless, being overly aggressive, and deciding to shoot at people rather than think about the situation. Now, one of the justifications that I've seen from Desmond Manning is saying he was outside to make sure that his son's window was closed. But if you're seriously afraid for your life, I don't know why any person would choose to be outside of their home and be exposed rather than inside of their home, where they can at least have the advantage to see what's going on and possibly not be seen in return. And you can defend your home from the inside. That makes a lot more sense than going outside to check on somebody who's inside. So Desmond Manning's story just really didn't add up for me. And I think it's pretty clear that his actions were reckless, they were callous, and they should attribute to charges. Alexis, again, was breaking the law. He was doing something that he shouldn't have done. But there's plenty of people that I know that have done reckless things who don't deserve to be murdered. Right? People, it's against the law to set off fireworks, yet we've had crazy amounts of fireworks this year. It's against the law to speed. It's against the law to do any number of things. It's against the law not to wear a mask in today's pandemic, and yet those people definitely shouldn't be murdered. And Alexis should also not be murdered simply for breaking the law and trespassing. He was not endangering anybody. He was not in the process of committing a violent crime. He was not suspected of committing a violent crime, and yet he was still murdered, and his murderer is still free. This is really close to me because I have a nephew who's 16 who was also Hispanic, and I hope he's never getting into trouble like this, but if he is, I hope that he gets a ticket or gets arrested or something like that, and doesn't get murdered by somebody who is simply trigger happy and eager to be able to shoot at somebody. It's not reasonable to shoot at somebody who's simply running through your yard. That's why I wanted to share Alexis Mendez Perez's story. It's not something that I've seen a lot of coverage about. It's actually not something that I even saw from the media. My brother actually brought it up to me, and I'm really glad that he did, because when I looked into it, it really just doesn't add up. And again, Beth McCann, the district attorney, has really failed her community in this. She needs to do better. She needs to be held accountable. And that's why I'm asking you all to sign the petition that I've linked to in the description of this video, and also call District Attorney Beth McCann, whose number I listed in the video description as well, and ask her and demand that she press charges for the murder of Alexis Mendez Perez. Again, Alexis Mendez Perez was only 16 years old, who was committing a crime that was not violent, and yet he was murdered. We need to make sure that Desmond Manning is brought to justice, that he's held accountable for his recklessness, and that this type of behavior, these types of actions are not seen as acceptable or the normal, but that we make it clear that the rule of law here is that you must be in danger, you must be protecting yourself in order to kill somebody. Again, take those action steps and let's help fight and bring justice for Alexis Mendez Perez. Thanks for watching.